Welcome, everybody, to the People, Purpose, and Profits Business Coaching Podcast. My name is Brian Buck, and you are?
I'm Kat. Welcome.
Welcome. We are so excited today to talk about focus and the importance of focus in your business, whether you are a solopreneur, a coach, or consultant, or if you're a small to medium-sized business. Focus is so critical for your success that we want to take today's episode to talk about it. Kat,
Awesome.
what are your thoughts about this topic?
Well, every time I, think of focus, there's a metaphor that comes to mind, and that is, we have incandescent light and, it lights up a room, but the same power, if you take it and put it into a laser, it can cut through steel. And, that's exactly what I think of, especially when we're coming across, coaching, especially in the coaching industry. When you first start out, you're almost like a very, very broad. But then if you really want to, have a business and build it to a point where you're monetizing your skills, you have to become focused, meaning that you have to start figuring out what you're the best at and what you love to do. And a lot of people are struggling to gain momentum, to have clients, to get results for this specific reason, because they're extremely broad and they have this fear of missing out. Like, does that make sense? Like,
absolutely. I think it's both a fear of missing out and sometimes, because I have definitely struggled with that. I'm a creative person who gets energized by the new and sometimes bored by the focus sometimes. But it really took a lot to be able to see how to actually turn that energy into something positive, because you start to really see when you have that focus, you're able to make a greater impact. Like when you are sharing that, I think it's behooving upon us as coaches, consultants, and business leaders to not only do focus because it's good for our business, but because it's being a leader for those that we serve. Because 9 out of 10 people don't have focus. Because we are in a world of distractions, we are whimsical, but everyone wants the results that focus brings. And so one of the things that I have loved about my entrepreneurial journey is this go first mentality. Is I want to have gone first. So if I want to help my clients be focused, I have to be focused. I have to have gone through. I have to share. It's hard at first, but man, once you get there, here's all the benefits and the massive amount of energy that you actually get when you are going there. In the world of improvement, we talk about this a lot of times on you can go a mile wide and an inch deep, or you can go an inch wide and a mile deep. And you get so much more when you go deeper on things to be able to really move the needle.
I completely agree. And, for me, like something that came to mind, especially in sports, I played volleyball for quite some time, and then there's different, positions that you can play. And, while you can do good at all of them, mastering one is, and this is what you want to be known for as well. Is if you master one, then people can say, okay, I can see your value. And, it's good for you too, because once you become good at something, when you become greater, your confidence, is even when you walk into the room as a coach or when you speak to someone, you come across more clear. Because your client can be very confused, especially if you're like, oh, well, I can help you with that too. Oh, I can help you with that too. Oh, I can, it's like, okay, I get it. We all can. But what, makes you stand apart from other people that maybe are charging way less than you are?
Right. Well, I also think too is, especially as a coach and consultant, you don't have that kind of focus. When you think about it from a project perspective, you have what they would call a scope creep, where all of a sudden now you're doing all of these little things and now you're juggling 20 different things, but you're not finishing anything. And when it comes time to renew your contract, you could say, look at everything we started. And they go, I'm paying you a lot of money and we haven't accomplished anything. A coach and a consultant, our number one responsibility is to help other people get what they need, and what they need are results. And if you don't have that focus, and if you get inspired by the client's lack of focus, you're going to be like, that's a good idea, we're going to do this. Oh, that's a great idea too, let's go do that. Oh, you're right, we need to work on. And all of a sudden you're all over the place, and you aren't able to really help them get there.
No, and it can lead, I noticed this in my business as well, is when you're not focused, overwhelm comes in, and you're like scattered. You're, stressed out of your mind because, as you said, you've got, like, you're juggling so many pieces and then nothing gets done. But if you actually stick with one, I always recommend between 1 to 3 projects per week, and get them to completion. And once you're done, then move on. Because if you have too much, and I think, I don't know who said it. It might have been Dr. Dispenza that said that our attention span, like, we come in and out of consciousness between 7 to 10 or 7 to 9 times per minute. And, that focus is so crucial, because if you don't know what you're focusing on, imagine like what your mind does to you.
Yeah.
So it's really, really important to know what you're looking for. And, the focus is also when it comes to opportunities, because if you know what you're after, then opportunities start becoming more clear, as what like your brain knows what kind of information it needs to filter out and what information it needs to let in.
That's true. And it helps you say no. I remember early in my business, I had a couple of really great opportunities come my way, but they would have pulled me out of where I was going. And I probably would have made good money doing them, but it wasn't my mission. And having the clarity of focus made it an easy no. But if you don't have the focus, then you're like, I might need this, I might need that, I might need this. And then all of a sudden we're going to have to go into our business. And I can't remember what her name is, but does this spark joy in my life? Does this spark needle moving in my business? Because all of a sudden we have all this stuff, and they really are representations of our lack of focus.
Yeah. And the another thing that always comes up, when it comes to focus, and to, is tied in with practice as well, is, knowing what you're aiming for. Because if you have, like 20 targets, like, which one are you going to go for? But if you have one, then you're better at, your chances of getting better are much, bigger.
Yeah. Well, one of the things, I don't know where I heard this, but they were talking about master black belts in martial arts. And they were saying, like, a new person might practice a kick 1,000 times. A master black belt has practiced it 10,000 times. And people were saying, well, why would they do that? If they could do it 1,000 times and they passed and got their belts, why are they still mastering it? But it's that focus is why they're unstoppable, because their basic kicks are going to be way better because they've had that focus. And they're not just like, what's the newest technique? What's the newest kick? The newest throw? They're really good at the basics and making them really work, because a lot of business is the basics. I would say if you're in the esoteric, you're far from the basics, and it's probably because you don't have focus.
Yeah, I agree. And, the mind, especially with how many distractions we have right now, is, oh my goodness, and I'm really, really curious to see where we're going to be 20 years from now, because I only think it's going to get worse.
Mm,
So, I do want to encourage people to take time to actually be still so that they can know what it's like to at least focus on your breath. Start with that. It doesn't have to, you don't have to start with making money, or you don't have to start with figuring out your niche, but at least master one thing. So focus on your breath, for example.
mm.
It's so hard. I've tried
Yeah.
it and I'm still working at it because, we are so used to our minds constantly wandering.
Mm,
And when you try to make it still, then there's some things that may surface,
yeah.
and in focusing, you can start actually listening and hearing some of the things that need to be dealt with, and you can make progress much faster. But we think that by being busy, we end up being more productive, and it's
Right.
completely the opposite.
Yeah, that's one of the things from Toyota is just because you're doing motion doesn't mean you're creating value. And that's that whole just because I'm busy. Uh, this also reminds me, I'm a ginormous stand-up comedy fan, and George Carlin is one of my favorites. I got to see him live twice. And George Carlin used to have this joke about what's up with all of these people walking around with headphones around the city? Are people afraid to think their own thoughts anymore? And I'm like, wow. And you look at everyone on their phones, I remember certain cities would put up foam around poles because people were walking into them because everyone's looking at their phone, and we're addicted to the notifications and seeing what's going on there. And someone we're going to interview soon on this podcast, Isaac Tolpin, is an entrepreneur friend of mine. I love what he has said in the past is we need to be more producers instead of consumers. Because so often we are just consuming or listening or reading, at what other people are doing instead of creating. And I think it comes down to how comfortable are we listening to our own thoughts?
Yeah.
Like, are we distracting ourselves or consuming because we don't like that internal focus?
And we do really need that for the purpose part, like
Mm-hmm.
we have in our podcast, the people, purpose, and profits. If you really do want to find your purpose, going in and being able to focus and being able to listen to your talk, is how you start like knowing and learning basically what you're passionate about.
Yeah.
And I suggest that everybody starts creating some type of a practice where they're alone with their thoughts for at least 20-30 minutes a day.
Yeah.
That's the least you can do. And it's so funny because I hear people, but I don't have time. Well, that just tells me that everything else besides yourself dictates your life. So
Right.
when are you going to be in charge of it?
Right. Well, and it's also saying you're not in charge of your time.
Right.
It's everything you do is by choice. If I said, well, being the Star Wars fan that I am, do you want to watch all of 9 films? You'd be like, if you're not a fan, you're like, no, I'm busy, Brian. I can't do it that day. But if I'm really passionate about it, I'm going to arrange my schedule to be able to do that.
But I'm curious because it's funny you brought that example. So what would it be when someone says, so let's say, for example, it's not Star Wars, but it's something that, it would be beneficial for them. How would we get them to understand that? How would we help
Yeah.
them?
I think it's 2 things. One is be intentional about everything you do, including when you want to be lazy. I'm intentionally lazy for 40 minutes. I'm like, this is my time. I'm not going to produce. I'm not going to do content. I'm not going to make a call. I'm going to do whatever. And doing it with that attention, with that intention, means everything you do goes towards that purpose. And maybe it's not the focus of where I'm going, but I know I'm doing it on purpose. It's when we just go with things. Like, oh, well, I'm now going to be lazy because I don't want to work on this, or I'm going to be lazy because I'm scared to pick up the phone.
Mm-hmm.
So I think one is recognize your power to be intentional, and once you say I'm going to be intentional, you begin to find ways to do that. And then the second one is boundaries. You need to set the boundaries with people in your life, your family, your friends, yourself. I remember one of the things that I started working out and exercising, and I had this crazy notion that I want to watch all the Die Hard movies. They don't get better as they go on, but the first one's really good. The last one wasn't. But I found I would go 5 more minutes. I'm going to watch 5 more minutes and then I'm going to pause it. And what I had to do is give myself the boundaries to say, I'm only going to watch these when I'm on the treadmill. And by giving myself that boundary, that makes it easier than to tell my family, hey, I'm going to work on being really clear about my mission. So I need 30 minutes where no one's bothering dad for a little bit. And when you say these things, sometimes they say, I can't do it then, but like people will then start to negotiate and you find time. But if we don't have those boundaries conversations, people are going to be like, how come you're never helping? Why you're never doing that? And you're mad. You're like, I'm just trying to focus on this. But it really comes down to, I wasn't intentional about how I wanted to spend my time, and I didn't communicate to other people my intentions and find out where I can make that time work.
Right. And also I think of, cost or reward, because there's a great cost of not, doing some of the things that are necessary to get you to where you want to be.
Yep.
And then the reward is getting to where you want to be, and the feelings and the money and the people and whatever it is that's important to you.
Yeah. I also want to add another piece of advice for focus too, is you're not going to have a deep state session and get the answers in one session. And just to help people recognize that it's going to be iterative, is if you just focus like, what is my mission and who do I want to serve? And you just start to journal and you start to write these things down. The more time you spend on those, and they don't always have to be connected, they will start to show up. I think there's another piece of focus that is also a little more active. It isn't just all about being quiet. It's also about focusing on, what are you talking a lot about? Like, to me, when I made the decision to help small to medium-sized business and solopreneurs, it really helped me when I go, what is it that I'm talking to everybody about? Like if you were going to say something about it, I'm going to light up and I'm going to start giving you some thoughts and ideas. And I'm like, oh, when I'm focusing on what I'm saying to other people that's lighting me up, that starts to become a trigger of what my focus is. My body and mind and heart are already telling me what I want to focus on. I just need to focus on what the heck I'm saying so I can do that,
It's
right?
so beautiful, yeah.
So what tips do you have on helping people with focus?
Well, I want to bring something up that came to mind as you were speaking, and that is multitasking. No bueno.
No.
I don't believe in it, and it's so funny because I remember
science doesn't believe in it either.
Right. And but for the longest time, and if you still look on, what people require in a job description is multitasking,
Yeah.
which basically tells me that maybe they don't have defined, boundaries or lines for the people that need to work for them in order to get the right results, right?
Yeah.
Because if I'm sitting over here and I'm doing your laundry and I'm also cooking and I'm also, God knows what, then I'm not really like doing any of them right, or I'm not giving the right attention to it. And there's the same thing in business too. If you're I think we talked about this, but if you're the marketing person, and then you're the accountant, and you're the copywriter, and then you're the coach, and you're like all these things, the more you juggle, the less you actually do, especially what you love. So it's important to recognize, okay, which part makes the most sense for me?
Yeah.
Am I multitasking or am I being focused? And if you are multitasking, then go ahead and see how you can delegate. Then go ahead and how you see how you can make the process better for yourself. Because ultimately, if your greatest impact is in helping people, then you're taking time away from that. And the marketing is going to suffer, the copywriting is going to suffer because you're not the best at it. So
Yep.
find help for it.
Well, you know what science actually has been proven about multitasking? You are 40% less productive
Productive.
when you
Oh, yeah.
multitask. 40%. That means everything's taking longer. So we all think, well, I got to keep everything going. And I always have to do coaching on multitasking, because if you start something and you have to hand it off to someone. So let's say when we're putting together our podcast, I've got some ideas I'm sending to you. I'm waiting on your answer. I could start something else, but it's very different than I'm talking to you while trying to check my phone, while trying to send an email. Like, it's when you're really doing three things at once. But it goes right back to what you were saying, is don't take on too many projects. You want to focus, that's the topic of the day, focus on getting things done, getting things to a level of completion. You might not finish the whole thing. Like, say you're going to do a launch. We're going to launch, a mastermind to be able to take care of our solopreneurs, coaches, small and medium businesses. Now, we're not going to create all of that in one day in one sitting, but we are going to get what's our vision, and that part's done, and then we chunk it into another chunk where we're going to say what's the greatest needs that people are telling us, so that way we are helping them with that. And then we get to creating the materials, and so projects naturally have breaks, but you still want to focus on getting these things done before you start something else.
So just focus on the steps.
Right.
Yeah, I love that. So any closing thoughts before we wrap this up?
I think just one other one. There's a wonderful book that I highly recommend people to check out. It's called Personal Kanban. It's by Jim Benson and Tony DeMary. And they have this amazing concept called limited work in progress. And it's this very notion of you only work on a few things until they get done. But I love one of the things they talk about is called existential overhead. And what that is anytime we start projects that we don't finish and we kind of abandon, our brains are still processing it. And all that's doing is adding additional stress that we don't need. And so I think by having this focus on who are you serving, what's the value you are creating, and what are the projects that are getting done to a launch or to serve, that is going to help you so much to be effective, but it's going to make you happier. Not just because you're going to maybe have, greater increase of money and freedom, but it's going to give you less stress. And that's huge.
It is. And the notion that comes to mind, the one that I refer to usually when I talk to clients, is loose ends, because that's really what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're trying to devote your time to something and you have all these loose ends, you're going to have a lot of distractions, and it's much harder to see what you're truly capable of if you have all this chatter or all this stuff happening in the back of your mind. So just, pay attention to what goes on around you. See what are some of the things that are nudging at you to get done before you can be in your best creative mode.
Love it. I think we might have to do a future episode too on systematizing things. Because, like some of these loose ends, like what's your customer service follow-up? Those are things we shouldn't have to use our creative energy for. We should have systems in place that we could just trust. So future episode, audience. So thank you everybody for listening to the People and Purpose and Profits Business Coaching Podcast. We got lots of ways that we could focus on you and you could focus on us in our Facebook page. There's a Facebook page, lets you know when the new episodes are coming out. It reminds you that we got our YouTube channel, and we also have our audio show on any podcaster of choice. And we also have a Facebook group where you can interact with Kat and I, so we can focus on what are the topics you care most about. Because the best way to make this podcast be one of your first listens is because we're going to give you what you need to be successful and make the impact that you want in your heart. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.